UCSD and the community of San Diego are very proud to pay hosts to this summit. We're grateful that we were chosen by the Council on Competitiveness. We think that this is a propitious site to exchange ideas about technology and progress. In many ways, San Diego has been a laboratory for testing how innovation lifts all boats in a regional economy. 15 years ago, San Diego was a Navy town with a world-famous zoo and a nice climate. 10 years ago, we were a geographic cul-de-sac with a failing economy. And today, this region is a growing high-tech powerhouse with a fertile ground for entrepreneurs. That metamorphosis didn't happen by chance. It took many visionaries and a lot of hard work. One of the visionaries was Irwin Jacobs of Qualcomm. Irwin, as you know, was a faculty member at the University of California, San Diego. An interesting vignette, when the governor of the state of California announced that the University of California, San Diego, and the University of California, Irvine, were chosen to coordinate one of his new institutes for science and innovation, Irwin and I shared a stage with a half a dozen other CEOs at a news conference where that announcement was made. Each CEO got up in turn and said how excited they were about the potential of this institute. They talked about economic growth, regional prosperity, and national competitiveness. Irwin's focus was quite different. Irwin expressed concern about the digital divide that exists between people at the higher rungs of the socioeconomic ladder and people at the lower rungs. He spoke with real feeling about how future innovation must make life better for all of those, all our neighbors, those that don't have access to technology as well as those that do. He said erasing the digital divide would be one of our most important tasks and our most gratifying achievements. That heartfelt speech reminded us yet again why Irwin is one of our region's most visionary corporate leaders and one of our most beloved civic leaders. With that, I introduce Irwin Jacobs.
Thank you very much, Bob, but I'm not sure if that was fair. But it is very exciting to be able to welcome everyone here for the second Innovation Summit. I thought the first one gave us a chance to perhaps compare notes, think about best experiences, and it very much focused in on education. And I think since then a number of very good things have happened. The CIT Squared initiative that Bob just mentioned here, which supports, I think, a very great research center in this case in communications, which will have a very profound impact, I believe, on the city, the region, the state, and the country. And so that's been a very significant step that has occurred since. We're just having a little discussion on another significant step on the educational side, High Tech High, which was a thought at the time of the first summit, now actually has classes, is proceeding ahead, and I think setting a model for many other locations. And so we've put a lot of thought into some of the areas that came up out of the first summit, and I think a significant progress has been made. One of the interesting things is that we've managed to also gather in a considerable amount of industrial support for these initiatives, and I think going forward that is very important. Since you did mention the digital divide, I think one of the critical items that we all have to confront is the fact that there is a significant difference in educational access and access to various wireless and internet activities, and we are looking at, again, using innovation perhaps to help solve that, to help lessen that divide, but I think that clearly is an area that is very important for all of us. So I hope over this next two-day period that we do have an opportunity to hear from many, get a lot of ideas on, again, how to proceed further. This whole issue of education, of innovation, of driving our economies, of making life better for many of us. I think a whole set of these topics will be approached here at the summit, and hopefully we'll come up with some good ideas. So thank you very much all for coming. I hope it turns out to be a very useful exercise.
Thank you, Erwin. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Raymond Gilmartin, the Chair and CEO of Merck and the Chair of the Council on Competitiveness. All of us at UCSD have enjoyed working with Ray in organizing this summit. He's been an ideal team captain, a director, and a motivator. At every stage in his leadership of this event, Ray has emphasized the important role that innovation plays in public life. For example, last year in accepting an award from the Albert Sabin Vaccine Institute, Ray summed up what drives the innovative spirit. He said, "Our vision of health is one in which the finest achievements of science can benefit humanity." That's really why we're gathered here. Our task at this summit is to ensure that science and technology continue to benefit humanity. I can't think of a better person to lead us in this exercise than a CEO who has made a public service a top corporate and personal priority. Please join me in welcoming Ray Gilmartin.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's a great pleasure to be here in San Diego as we begin the second National Innovation Summit. The strong climate for innovation that exists here in San Diego, and when I say strong climate, obviously no pun intended, is a model for what the Council on Competitiveness would like to see in more communities throughout the country. For those of you who are less familiar with the Council, we're an organization of corporate chief executives, university presidents, and labor leaders. And our purpose is to set an action agenda to strengthen U.S. economic competitiveness, which we define as a rising standard of living for all Americans and leadership in world markets. And central to our mission is understanding and increasing the United States' innovative capacity. 3 years ago, at the Council's first Innovation Summit, we began to create broader national awareness around the idea that innovation matters. Since then, the Council has developed a compelling framework of innovation priorities that were clearly articulated in a recent Council report called U.S. Competitiveness 2001. This report was developed under the leadership of Professor Michael Porter at the Harvard Business School and Deborah Van Opstal, Senior Vice President of the Council on Competitiveness. And we're fortunate that Mike will be here with us as a speaker later this afternoon. U.S. Competitiveness 2001 highlighted the role of innovation as a key driver in America's unprecedented economic growth during the 1990s. But it also pointed out that the growing capabilities for innovation that now exist in many other parts of the world. And to maintain and expand America's innovative capacity, the report says that we must, first, extend our lead in science and technology, second, boost the skills of our workers, and finally, as I stated earlier, strengthen regional clusters of innovation. These priorities will form the basis of much of our discussion throughout this summit, and I'd like to say a few words about each to help set the stage. First, America must extend its national lead in science and technology. As the chairman of Merck, I know firsthand that investments in cutting-edge science hold the key to our company's future. Applying genomics, proteomics, and other new technologies is central to the discovery of the next generation of medicines to extend people's lives and improve their quality of life. As chairman of the Council of Competitiveness, I can say with equal conviction that continued investment in science and technology overall holds the key to our nation's future economic growth. Innovation in science and technology drives America's growth. Underpinning that growth has been a sustained climate of support for publicly funded science and engineering research. In a knowledge-driven world economy, the importance of this crucial underpinning is more vital than ever. Unfortunately, although many companies continue to invest heavily in research and development, the nation as a whole spends less today on research as a portion of the national wealth than it did 15 years ago. The primary cause of this decline has been the federal government's shrinking investment in research, from 46% of the nation's total R&D investment in 1985 to just 27% in 1999. Recent increases in funding for the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation are encouraging signs, but the nation's overall research portfolio has become increasingly unbalanced. Since publicly funded science is a driver of private innovation, this balance must be corrected to ensure our ability to compete at a high level for the long term. The Council's second major priority is boosting overall workplace skills. A knowledge-based economy needs more educated and better trained workers, but the U.S. ranks just 10th in the percentage of 24-year-olds with science and engineering degrees, and the number of students enrolled in science and engineering programs has declined every year. Further, more than 10% of young Americans fail to complete high school, and many who do get a high school degree still lack basic literacy skills and cannot effectively compete for well-paying jobs that require 2 or more years of college. Our economy needs more and better trained workers, and to get there, we must strengthen math and science education in grades K through 12. We need to expand the science and engineering talent pool. And in particular, we must address the critical shortage of women and minorities, the fastest growing segments of our workforce, in science and engineering jobs. And finally, we need to provide skill training opportunities to more workers as their jobs become technologically more complex. The Council's third priority is to strengthen regional clusters of innovation. These clusters are the Silicon Valleys, the Route 128 corridors, the Research Triangles, and the San Diegos that dot the American landscape. In an era of increased globalization, it is ironic that the drivers of innovation are, if anything, more local. The Council believes that it is critical to heighten the understanding of the role of clusters in innovation and to raise its visibility on the national agenda. We need to raise awareness about the synergy that can be created when government, the academic community, and the private sector work together to create a positive environment for innovation at the local level. This includes making sure that the right physical and information infrastructures exist, that a strong research base and talent pool can be created, and that the political and regulatory climate is such that companies will want to locate and expand their businesses in a particular region. Although there are many other factors that affect competitiveness, the Council believes that these overarching priorities, extending our lead in science and technology, boosting workplace skills, and strengthening regional clusters of innovation, are the roadmap to a strong competitive future for our country. Our task at this summit is clear. With your help and participation in our discussions, we will seek to frame a national action agenda to implement these priorities. Our focus is deliberately on the long term. While much of the talk in Washington and the financial media centers on the need for short-term economic stimulus, we at the Council think that the country needs a long-term innovation agenda to assure our nation's competitiveness and prosperity over the next decade and beyond. After the conclusion of the summit, we'll finalize and present our innovation agenda to the Bush administration, members of Congress, our nation's governors, and local leaders. As you've already seen from the letter sent to us from the Senate Science and Technology Caucus, there's a very strong interest in the summit as a vehicle for helping to lay the foundations for our nation's prosperity over the long term. With a distinguished roster of panelists and the insights of everyone who have taken the time to be with us here for the summit, I've no doubt that this will be a great meeting and that the results we produce will make a difference. So thank you all for being here, and now let's get down to work. And thank you. Thank you. And I can think of no better way to get to work now to introduce the chairman of the House Science Committee, the Honorable Sherwood H. Boehlert. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a strong supporter of science and technology and a strong believer in the value of innovation. He will be joining us via satellite from Washington, D.C., and there he is. Congressman Boehlert is now serving his 10th term in Congress as a representative from Central New York. He has been served on the House Science Committee since 1983, and this year he assumed the chairmanship of this committee. The House Science Committee has jurisdiction over all federal non-military scientific and technology research and development programs, and the federal government spends more than $30 billion a year on these programs. Congressman Boehlert is also a delegate to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, where he serves as chairman of the Assembly's Scientific and Technology Committee. Please welcome me in joining Congressman Boehlert. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a real pleasure for me to have this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm not sure that anyone would have invented this satellite technology if they knew we were going to be using it just to listen to congressmen. But technology has unintended consequences, for better or for ill, as I'm sure you'll acknowledge during your discussions in San Diego. I'd hoped to be with you in person today, but plans change, and I'll be leaving tomorrow with Speaker Hastert on a mission to Africa. I plan to use that extended time with the Speaker and a number of members of the White House staff who will be along to convey to them the points I suspect you would be conveying to them if you had that opportunity. Those points by now are pretty clear, if inadequately heeded. First, the federal government needs to be making a sizable, consistent, and balanced investment in research and development. Second, no investment will guarantee our future prosperity unless we do a better job of educating Americans of all ages in math and sciences. And third, all elements of American society, including all levels of government, need to do a better job of working together if we are to ensure the continuing growth of our economy and the betterment of our people. By the way, if you're looking for a great source of data to back up those points, you needn't look further than the Council on Competitiveness's report, U.S. Competitiveness 2001, which I suspect is readily available at the conference. Now, as I've noted, the 3 points I made are pretty hard to argue in the abstract, but not even Congress can get away with just working in the abstract forever. So we need to develop concrete, defensible policies to ensure an adequate investment in research, to improve education at all levels, but especially K through 12, and to promote cooperation between business and government and among all levels of government. This is where I think the conference can be enormously helpful. I hope that you can help me and the Science Committee design those policies which are among our top priorities this year. How would you do that? Well, let me throw out some specific questions with which you might wrestle during your proceedings. First, how can we determine what the appropriate level of funding is for particular fields of science, mathematics, and engineering? Sure, we all know that more seems better, but, and if I turn the page, that's not helpful in the real world of budget constraints and hard choices. Second, relatedly, how can we determine the appropriate balance among R&D investments in different disciplines and in different agencies? Disproportionate growth in one agency, say NIH, may raise a red flag and certainly may provoke paroxysms of envy, but how do we know it's creating an actual problem? How can we ensure we have the appropriate balance among basic research, applied research, and development, to use what I know are grossly oversimplified categories? Fourth, related to that, are the increasing linkages between industry and universities are they distorting the research or education agenda in any troubling way? Perhaps most importantly, how can we get universities and industry involved in a more comprehensive, ongoing way with improving K through 12 math and science education? I've got a lot of questions. How can we improve the supply of math and science teachers, which is clearly the key to ensuring better education in the long run? And how can we ensure accountability in our schools without turning them into testing factories? There are many more questions, of course, including the essential ones about increasing the number of women and minorities in math and science and engineering that my two colleagues will be discussing shortly. But these should give you plenty to chew on. I must say that having thrown down the gauntlet, I'm not now just relieved, and I won't be with you to come up with the answers. That's the hard part. But seriously, seeking those answers is exactly what we intend to be doing on the Science Committee this year, and we'll continue to work with you. I should mention that Sharon Hayes of the committee, she's out there right now. She'll be attending the conference and reporting back to all of us. So let me close by thanking Chancellor Dines and President Atkinson and Ray Gilmartin and John Yokelson of the Council and everyone involved in putting together this very impressive and very important conference. I'll be with you in spirit, and I hope your work will inspire those of us in Washington to come up with new solutions to the perennial but perhaps worsening problems. Now let me turn to one of the senior and most valued members of the Science Committee, my colleague from Maryland, Connie Morella.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Connie Morella from Maryland. I am excited about kicking off with you your National Innovation Summit in San Diego, California. You know, I was told to not be political, to be serious, because, you know, they say the problem with political jokes is that sometimes they get elected. But I'm delighted to address such a distinguished array of people who are involved in science and very much involved with the committee and the Council on Competitiveness's 2001 report. And I want to share with you a national initiative to increase the participation of women, underrepresented minorities, and persons with disabilities in the high-tech workforce. Several Congresses ago, I introduced legislation which became law, establishing a bipartisan congressional commission on the diversity challenge in science, engineering, and technology. The commission studied the discrepancies in the existing education pipeline and documented widespread imbalances. For instance, women, who comprise almost 40% of our overall workforce, hold only 15% of the jobs in technical fields. For instance, African Americans and Hispanics, who make up 21% of the workforce, hold only 6% of those jobs. For instance, 7 out of 10 high-skilled technical positions are held by white men, who make up about 40% of the workforce. Well, the Commission came up with the conclusion that redressing this imbalance is an economic and social imperative, that we know. Our increasingly diverse nation can only prosper on a broad foundation of human talent in order to maintain leadership in an increasingly global economy. The Commission made recommendations in 3 areas. They looked at pre-college education, access to higher education, and the professional workforce. The Commission also recommended a comprehensive effort to transform the image of math and science education and the careers in these professions. So today, I'm happy to announce to you that the Commission's call to action is going to produce results. Already, a coalition of 7 federal agencies, led by the National Science Foundation, has provided seed funding of $2.2 million to establish a public-private partnership to carry on the work of the Commission. I want to commend and I want to thank the director of the National Science Foundation, my good friend, the distinguished scientist, Dr. Rita Caldwell, for her commitment to meeting our high-tech workforce needs through the development of educational opportunities for underrepresented groups. This new partnership will be called BEST. That's an acronym for Building, Engineering, and Scientific Talent. I think it fits. It will spearhead a 3-year national campaign by establishing itself as the nation's hub for identifying and sharing best practices in building a stronger, more diverse technical workforce. BEST will be a resource for any institution or community in the country that wishes to meet the diversity challenge. The Council on Competitiveness, which has done a terrific job on strengthening the talent pool, has led the effort of launching this new organization, and to them I am most grateful. The Council will hold the federal seed funding and will provide operational assistance until BEST is formally established, which will be later this spring. The Council will also help facilitate support and participation from the private sector, which will be absolutely crucial for this national initiative to succeed. I also want to take this opportunity to thank John Yokelson, to thank him for the energy and the vision that he has provided thus far. I also want to express my appreciation to Irwin Jacobs, the CEO of Qualcomm and one of the summit hosts. I want to thank him for making the first private sector commitment to help leverage federal seed funding. Thank you very much. I will be joined here by Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who has agreed to co-chair with me the National Leadership Council of BEST. This council is going to consist of private and public sector leaders who will ensure that the findings, recommendations, and insights of BEST get high-level attention in Washington and across the country. Together, and with your help, such a distinguished array of scholars and scientists assembled in San Diego, we look forward to mobilizing the entire nation to help to meet our high-tech diversity challenge. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Outstanding, everyone.
Thank you. We just both sorry we're not there with you.
And to continue in that vein, I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, who is joining us here in San Diego, the Honorable James B. Hunt, who recently completed his 4th term as Governor of North Carolina. A nationally recognized leader in education and a strong believer in the importance of regional clusters of innovation, Governor Hunt, during his tenure, led his state through 2 decades of dramatic economic growth and change. Governor Hunt has devoted much of his life in public service to improving the quality of teaching in America. Among other accomplishments, he helped lay the groundwork for the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards and has served as chairman of the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future at Stanford University. Governor Hunt also founded the award-winning The Smart Start program, a public-private partnership that provides quality child care, health care, and support to families and children throughout North Carolina. Governor Hunt also fostered the growth of new technology in his state by establishing institutions such as the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, the Microelectronics Center of North Carolina, and the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. As head of a company that operates a facility in North Carolina, in Wilson, I had the chance to see close up the economic and educational progress made in North Carolina during Governor Hunt's tenure. And we're very fortunate to have him with us throughout this summit. Please join me now in welcoming Governor Hunt.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say to you again that in all of my 4 terms as governor, one of the best things that happened was when you put your plant in my hometown. The fact is, as I recall, it was within weeks of the time you were first named as the best company in America. And you kept it for several years. Well, I want to say how pleased I am to be here with all of you, especially with Governor Ridge, who I admire greatly and who I'm glad to see is still pushing his colleagues in the Congress. We all enjoyed being at the Chancellor's beautiful home. And I noticed that hang glider kept staying up there. Is that your son or? Okay, well, we were all sort of amazed at how that fellow did that. I want to commend the Council on Competitiveness for this 2nd National Innovation Summit dealing with sustaining America's prosperity. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. We all, you heard these different perspectives and challenges a few minutes ago, and they're very good. Actually, my first involvement with this organization began about 20 years ago, and I had the pleasure of riding over on the bus with my friend John Young today. John, I remember when you were chairing this, and you came down and spoke at an Emerging Issues Forum at North Carolina State. You may have come a couple of times over the years. He did a terrific job, and I remember when the National Governors Conference got involved in these kinds of issues. I think our first initiative was something called the NGA Task Force on Technological Innovation, and that went very strongly for a number of years. In 1999, I know that Tom Ridge and Governor Leavitt and Governor, now Senator Tom Carper, launched an initiative entitled The New Economy, Growing in a Global and Technological Age. And that is going on now, exploring a number of state strategies in areas like using research and development to grow state economies, building strong economies by promoting university industry technology transfer, growing new businesses with seed and venture capital. But these are activities that the National Governors Conference is very interested in and very involved with. And the fact that Governor Ridge has come out here to spend 2 days of his valuable time tells you something about how important it is to governors. I think it is clearly appropriate now that this council and our nation focus on innovation to sustain our prosperity in a way perhaps more strongly than we ever have before. And I think it's important, and this may be a place where I would bring a little different perspective on this. I think we'd all agree with it, but I would perhaps emphasize it a little more. I think it's important to do this, to focus on innovation, not just for the benefit of America's companies, but also for the benefit of all American citizens. And I think it's important that we talk to the people that way. You heard Chairman Boehlert talk a few minutes ago about what's it going to do for me, asking that question. And I think all of us believe in that. We wouldn't disagree with that. I'm saying to you, I think it's very important we talk to the American people in these terms. Today, for example, and we all are keenly aware of this, we're seeing thousands of jobs being cut out every day. Certainly in my state, I don't know about yours. Many areas are badly hurt, and other cuts may still be on the way. But as this council knows, global forces are at work that make our emphasis on innovation even more important. I recently returned from addressing a major corporate conference in Bangalore, India, that was sponsored by the Asia Society of New York and the Wall Street Journal and the Confederation of Indian Industries. It was interesting that while I was there, and you've all been there, I was talking to my friend John Luce, the CEO of Corning, the other day, and we had lunch in Raleigh, and I said, well, I'm about to go to Bangalore. He said, I've been there 30 times. By the way, just incidentally, it happens that 30% of all the optic fiber in America is made in my home state, and he makes most of it. Tom, maybe you make the rest of it. I don't know. In any event, while I was there in India, the press was filled up with stories about young Indian women working in call centers and back office operations, who, by the way, when they get you on the telephone, sound like they're from Des Moines, which is my wife's hometown, I can say that. Young women who have good educations, most of them college degrees, who speak flawless English, who know what happened on Ally McBeal last night. In fact, and you will note my tie today, who know who won the NCAA basketball tournament. In fact, they know how great Shane Battier is. By the way, they work for $2 or $3 an hour. And of course, many of your companies use them. During the last decade, India has created an $8 billion computer software industry from scratch. Again, I'm not telling you all anything about this. You know it better than I do. I want to sort of bring it to my mind and then move on to some points from that. In fact, at the conference I attended, Mr. Dewang Mehta, president of the India National Association of Software and Service Companies, said this regarding the present U.S. economic situation. He said, quote, "We feel we can convert the slowdown in the U.S. into an opportunity for the Indian technology industry." And then he went on to say, "We plan to travel to the United States this year to lobby 300 U.S. companies who are not now in India to send us their projects." And while the conference was being held, America's sixth largest bank, First Union, which Tom and I claim some ownership of in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, was cited in the International Herald Tribune as deciding to use 2 Indian software companies to, quote, "pare cost and increase profits." And their chief operating officer for eChannel said, we want to focus away from the $150 an hour rate in the U.S. to make software to an average rate of $50 per hour in India. Now, I sort of say that to get to my next points. While I understand the global pressure on U.S. firms to cut costs and to be competitive and to earn profits, you have to or you won't be in business and there won't be any jobs. I also know that those pressures or those things put even greater pressure on us as a nation to become more innovative, to come up with new products and services, new and better ways to do it. It's a constant moving thing, and you have to run faster every minute to stay ahead. You don't ever get there and stop. And I think it means that we have to develop and constantly improve an American skilled workforce that has strong reasoning skills and the ability to keep up with evolving technologies, especially IT. And I further know that many of the jobs going to India are going, I know this as a person who just come from my state this morning. A lot of the jobs going to India, and we could talk about Singapore and other places, are going out of my state. And I know it's just the beginning in some of these areas. Now, what this means to me is simply that this national summit is critically important. This summit, with its goal of developing a national action agenda to advance U.S. economic competitiveness and underpin long-term prosperity, and we could add, and good jobs for our people. This is the only way to go. It's the only thing we can really do about it, to see that Tom and I and all of your people have those jobs and those opportunities for their families and their children and their grandchildren. We must win the skills race. We must lead in discovery. We must strengthen regional clusters of innovation, and we must develop more of them. John Young was talking about Boise, Idaho, and the things that started there 20 years ago, and what's happened since, and Austin, Texas, and you could name many of them. I urge that we all participate fully in this conference. The roundtables are set up tomorrow to give everybody a chance to be heard, to give your ideas, for us, all of us to pull the best thoughts that we have together. that we develop consensus on a few of the most important recommendations that ought to be conveyed. Much of it has been, of course, but updated and perhaps with some new ideas to these leaders in Washington and to the nation's governors and to the partnership leadership that we have in every state. That this be then the agenda of the Council on Competitiveness, and that it be on America's national action agenda. The things that we are going to do. And we've got to, people need to know. People who are pretty good leaders in the various states and throughout this country ought to have an idea of what are the 5 things, to pull a number out of a hat, that we need to do to be more innovative and to be more competitive. We don't need a list of 20. There are a list of 20, and there's subcategories in all these areas. But we really need to make this something that average people can understand and identify with and find their place in, what they can do about it. And, of course, to provide long-term and real prosperity broadly to the American people, including, I might add, and Chairman Boehlert mentioned this and others, including those people who are now left out in America. And as we've just heard census reports, we know how many there are. In some areas it's growing, and we absolutely morally have to do something about it. But I think morality and the economy are very closely tied together. Now, this must clearly, I believe, be an effort by a broad array of American leadership. And that's one of the great things about this council, as I see it, and have seen it over 20 years. This council is representative of the public-private partnership that is so essentially American, something that amazes people in other parts of the world, how we do it together. And frankly, I think we do it together best in the states and in many, many local areas. We must have the leadership of our national government, executive and legislative. We must have strong involvement by state governments, by the governors, by local governments. The National Governors Association has just, I believe, John Yokelson has just entered a partnership with the council, or is about to promote leadership in state and local innovation. We have many activities going on in the states. Governor Ridge will share many of his, I'm sure, tomorrow. The states that are working on the cluster studies are deeply involved. In North Carolina, we have just gone through a very extensive 1 or 2 year process of going out to the people all over our state, meetings across the state, 1,000 people coming and being involved, developing different task forces, and coming up with a plan, a strategy for our state that does belong to the people. And many of them now, by the way, have established in their local areas their own councils on innovation. This council, of course, has the powerful involvement of higher education leaders and other education leaders. I'm very proud that to be here with the president of the University of North Carolina System, Molly Corbett Broad, who is a great leader in all of these areas, with the chancellor of my own university, Mary Ann Fox, and others from North Carolina. So this has got to be an emphasis and a program and an agenda for all of us and the broad array of American leaders. But somebody has to lead it. Somebody's got to push. Somebody's got to spotlight it. Somebody's got to educate leaders and the public and stay on it and keep the focus on it in all the ways we can figure out. You've had some pretty good ones. We need more. And it needs to be tied in. And by the way, it's going to be a little easier to do this, unfortunately, now, at a time when things aren't going so great. If you're losing the big the manufacturing jobs in the big established industries, even if they may be fairly new high-tech industries, where are the new jobs going to come from? You see, this gives us an opportunity to say, hey, we've got to use this approach. We've got to become more innovative if we're going to have the new jobs in the future, in the genomics area that John Young was talking about, and so many others. Now, I think that's a special mission. What I've just described, I think, is a special and very critical mission of the Council on Competitiveness. And of course, that council has invited all of us here. Many of you are parts of the council, most of us are not. But they've invited us here to develop the strategy and to come up with what I think we could call America's plan. And I say that to you to emphasize how important I think this is. You know, President Bush has some ideas about this. Chairman Boehlert and others have some ideas. Governors have some ideas. But we need to have a sort of an agenda, a national agenda. I used to have in the governor's office, and I'd have it in the governor's mansion, my agenda. And you came in, wherever you were looking at that agenda. People got sick of looking at it. When I wound up my last term, we had accomplished everything on the list. Not fully, but made the progress that we had said we would try to do in X number of years. Let me conclude with a few thoughts on the workforce. Of course, when we say the workforce, we are talking about the people who work in America at all levels, from the most mundane, routine jobs to those people who do the most creative, basic research and development work. That's all of the workforce. But we're also talking about the citizens of America. This is important to understand. The workforce is not some sort of sterile, neutral something out there. It's us, the people. We might be able to get along, some of your companies might be able to get along with a few bright, creative, innovative workers. In fact, historically, that's about what we had. But we will do much better, including your companies, if we have lots of them. If technological innovation isn't something that's just done at a high level with immense promise of return, but is happening throughout the economy, in every company, in every activity. We're raising the level of technology, and we're being innovative, and we're making things more valuable. And the more of that we have, the more it diffuses or infuses our whole society and economy, the better off we are. Furthermore, I believe that the commitment of the United States to largely free world trade, and my guess is that everybody in this room is in favor of it. I believe that the commitment of our nation to it carries with it an implicit commitment to enable our people, our workforce, to possess the skills and innovative qualities that will enable them to have good jobs and contribute real value to the high-value goods and services that we want to have in the world. I've said here, I want you to understand what I'm saying. I don't believe, and let me just go ahead and be a little plainer about this. I don't believe the people of America are going to be willing to be totally engaged in the world, which I think is the right thing. And I push for NAFTA and GATT and all the rest. I don't think they're going to buy that if we don't give them the skills and knowledge and ability to be successful in that kind of economy. And I think that the testing is ahead of us, folks. It could get a lot tougher if we don't do the right things. Now, to do that, to empower our people, our workforce in that way, I believe will require a commitment to education for young people and adults in America far beyond anything we have done thus far. Far beyond. It means education of a high quality that works, that is reflected in students' learning to a high level in every school in America. that will mean access to computer technology in all schools, including poor schools, and this council speaks to that regularly, as it should. But even more, it means having qualified, caring, competent teachers in every American classroom. Now, if there's one point I want to make to you all today, it's the one I'm about to make now. How are we doing with our teachers? We say something, several points, about math and science teaching, as we should. How are we doing with our teachers generally? Have you seen that little, I don't know if it's a public service ad or if somebody pays for it on television. This little boy and his class, I think, are holding hands and going through the Museum of Natural History in New York, and they show that picture, and the little boy says to his daddy, I think I want to be a teacher. And his daddy says, well, son, wouldn't you rather be a doctor? Being a doctor is a profession of high honor, and you can make a lot of money. And the little boy says, well, if we didn't have teachers, where would doctors come from? How are we doing with our teachers? 5 years ago, I chaired a group entitled the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future. We did what I thought was a superb study and report on what it will take to have qualified, these were the term of art we used, qualified, caring, competent teachers for every American student. We made recommendations about what it would take. Yesterday, I reviewed with Barnett Berry on President Broad's staff and a great teacher whom I know, how we've done in the last 5 years. How do you suppose we've done in America in getting more qualified, caring, competent teachers? How have we done in your state? Do you know? Well, let me tell you, we haven't made much progress as a nation. Some states have done pretty well. I'm proud that in North Carolina that we have raised the qualifications for teachers, the standards that they have. We've raised salaries by 50% in just 4 years. 1/4 of all the 10,000 nationally board certified teachers in America are in my state. President Broad of our university system is a constant champion and advocate of it, but we haven't done nearly enough. And in some of your states, big urban states, you will have in your urban areas 25 or 30 or 35% of teachers who aren't qualified to teach the subjects they're teaching. Folks, what are we going to do about this? What are you doing about it now? What is this council doing about it? And should we do more? I mean, you can't do everything, I know that. But recently, 4 major American business organizations that had been spending their time, frankly, in the past on standards and technology, both of which are very good, and they made some progress, have come out and said the main thing we've got to focus on now is teaching. As we move toward an innovation agenda and being a force that can make a difference and really bring about change in this society and this economy, should we not put good teaching for all of America's children and adults on that agenda, high on it, and push very hard on it? I believe that we should, as you would suspect. But I also want to say this to you as I close. We know a lot about how to do it, folks. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's chaired commissions and boards in this area for 15 years, if we try hard enough, we can do it. But it's got to be a major priority, I think, for this council and certainly for America. Suppose we make a qualified teacher in every classroom as important as high standards and public accountability, which we've talked about so much. Suppose we make it as important as a $1.6 trillion tax cut. And I'm not knocking a tax cut. That's a priority. That's being focused on. That's being pushed on, worked on. Folks, there are many issues. I commend this council and this summit for focusing on them. I think we've got the right people here to talk about them, and I am eager to hear your ideas, and I appreciate this opportunity to be here with you. Thank you very much.
UCSD-TV's coverage of the National Innovation Summit was made possible by a grant from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.